Great day, amazing humans. Yes, welcome to Empowered in My Skin, the podcast. My name is Nkechi Robinson, and I am founder and CEO of Empowered in My Skin, an experienced technology executive of one of Canada's largest financial institutions, an author, an International Federation of Bodybuilding pro athlete, an inspirational speaker, and a viral sensation as my You Matter speech has hit over 6.5 million views worldwide. This show is all about thriving. And I will be bringing on some amazing humans that own their thrive to help you figure out how you too can own yours. So please leave a review on whatever platform you're listening to this on, and make sure to join along on the web at empoweredmyskin.com so you can be notified when new episodes are available. For now, I'm your girl. Let the show begin. Great day, amazing humans. Yes, welcome to the next episode of the Own Your Thrive podcast. On today, my guest is a dynamic finance and management consulting professional with over 12 years of experience driving change and delivering improvements to business performance. He has a knack for challenging the status quo and taking productivity to the next level. He is a confident leader and mentor. He is known for having an exceptional focus on finding gaps, developing and implementing action steps to achieve desired results. His professional community work earned him a 2019 CPA Ontario Emerging Leaders Award. He was the former president and member of the Canadian Association of Urban Financial Professionals, known as COFP, and now he chairs as the organization's corporate advisory board. On top of that, he is passionate about photography and is currently the lead photographer at Zisco Photography. And if that's not enough, in March of 2020, he launched a podcast called Made to Lead. The show tells personal and professional stories of amazing people of African descent who are leading in their various spaces. Each episode features an interview with a dynamic individual about their achievements, challenges, dreams, and aspirations. These candid conversations are meant to showcase the wonderful talent of the African diaspora and to inspire you to take action because you're also made to lead. So how about we get on it? Put your ears together for the amazing Aziz Garuba. Yes!
Thank you very much, Nkechi. Yeah, I actually haven't heard that intro read that way before, so that's awesome.
I know, really I almost needed to take some water. I was like, whoa.
I'm very happy to be here.
I'm actually happy. I say this at the beginning of most of my podcasts now, ever since I interviewed Jody Kovich, but I'm excited to share energy with you for the next 35 minutes or so. So let's just get started. If you could tell me and the guest and the listeners about the person, the brand that is Aziz Garuba.
Sure. So I'll start from the beginning. So I was born and raised in Nigeria up until the age of about 13, 14. And then we moved to Canada because my dad got a posting here. And that was our sojourn into this part of the world. So I hadn't heard about the country Canada except in like books. And so it was quite an interesting journey to travel across, the entire breadth of the Atlantic Ocean to come to Canada. And we settled in Ottawa because that's where my dad was posted to. And so I completed high school there. Went to university there as well, went to the University of Ottawa, studied accounting and finance at the Telfer School of Management, and started a career, like most people in Ottawa, with the federal government. Started off as a tax auditor for the good old, Canada Revenue Agency. So I was the guy that few people wanted to hear from because they knew that it was either going to be good news or really, really bad news. And the good news meaning that you're okay, Mm-hmm. So I did that for a while and, got to a point where I was like, you know what, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. When I was an undergrad, I was a very dynamic student. I was the VP Finance for my faculty student council, then followed by becoming president of the student council. So I was very involved in a lot of things, did a lot of case competitions, won a few of those. And so, getting into the government and getting there for a while, it felt that dynamism was just sort of, contained a little bit. And, the government's a great place to work, don't get me wrong, but just wasn't, suited for me, my personality at the time. I was young, I was ambitious. I had a whole bunch of crazy goals, like most people that are Nigerian. We feel that we can take over the world at any point in time. And so I was on that path. So I decided that, let me make a change. Decided to enroll in Queens for an MBA program, because that was a way for me to switch careers. And luckily, I was able to get in without too much of a hassle. And I got into the accelerator program, so that allowed me to keep working while doing full-time school. So I was building my work experience at the same time. And what that was advantageous, because when I graduated and started to look for new careers, I hadn't lost any time. I hadn't lost any experience. I hadn't lost any work periods of time, which ended up working to my benefit when I decided to move to Toronto and join RBC. So I ended up getting a role at RBC within a finance rotation program. And that sort of started my career in financial services. I went from, knowing nothing about banking, coming from a tax audit background, to, going through the different parts of a financial institution. I was fortunate enough to work in the UK as well as part of my rotations at the bank. And ultimately, get into a variety of interesting projects. And moving to Toronto was great because, it was my first time moving away from home, if you will, venturing into this large city that is Toronto. And also it got me to for the first time to really understand that, hey, I'm actually a Black person, because I didn't pay attention to that prior to coming to Toronto. And I noticed that when I actually joined CAUFP, because I was like, oh, this is a room of many Black people. Like I went to school. I finished high school in a predominantly white high school in Ottawa. In university, similar thing. I was in accounting and finance. So yeah, there were Black people on campus, but not in my program. Not many in my program, at least. So coming into Toronto and seeing a sea of, professional Black folk, I wasn't the only one now wearing a 3-piece suit or looking fly, going to work. So that was exhilarating. That was really exciting. And, I decided to get involved. I decided to help out in as many ways as I could. And, doing things to help improve the organization, from transforming technology that the association was using, to revamping our branding and image. And then, I got involved on the board, became the VP of internal operations, then ultimately president, and now chair of the board, chair of the advisory board. But yeah, through all of that experience, I ultimately left RBC about a couple of years ago because I wanted to venture out into something else. I joined Ernst & Young at the time because I was getting bored. No, not bored, but I had reached a point where I wanted to see what was happening outside of a singular institution with regards to the change in technology and how that was impacting finance. And an opportunity arose that allowed me to get into Ernst & Young to do exactly that. So I exploring finance transformation, working with a variety of large clients, global clients that were really, really shaping and shifting their finance teams and finance functions to leverage the latest and greatest technology. And my goal with stepping out was to take in all of that experience and then, hopefully get back into industry and help drive that kind of change and transformation within a singular organization. So that's kind of where I am right now. I'm going to be doing a lot of that back at RBC. So getting back into where I started my financial services career, and going to be doing exactly what I plan to do.
And well, definitely you've expressed just how dynamic you are. And one of the interesting tidbits, I'm not sure if anyone picked up on it, but it's interesting because you said that when you came to Toronto and when you were doing the work with coffee and you were in a room with all Black people, that's when you sort of really realized, I'm this Black guy, versus in a sea of white people and standing out. Why do you think that is?
Well, I don't know. So I believe I was sort of the token a lot of the times, right? And because of the way we were raised, how we grew up in Nigeria, right? My parents were raised us to be global citizens, if you will, right? So we had opportunities, we had privileges that most people didn't have. I guess I was also a bit of a social nerd. So I was one of the kids when I was younger that the encyclopedia was a great book for me. When we actually had encyclopedias. So I'd spend time, consuming knowledge of a variety of little things, random things that in a normal circumstance, they're great conversation starters in one circle, but not for the majority of society. Like I could tell you, random things like, the time between when a plane lifts off the ground and when the gears, close in, and like
you should go on Jeopardy. You should go on Jeopardy.
So a lot of those things. And so with that in mind, right, moving to Canada again, culture shock, right? Not because we hadn't traveled, but I hadn't lived in a school system where, I was one of very few Black people. But it wasn't an issue because, again, we had traveled widely, summers in the UK, different countries, visited the United States for extended periods of time. And getting here, was easy to sort of fit in because, like I said, my parents raised us to be global citizens and focused on achieving wherever we were, regardless of what was around us. But then, getting into Toronto and seeing a lot of Black people in one location of a certain caliber, I realized that I was no longer the only one, So among my friends in university, right? Yeah, I was that token Black guy, right? And, we all joked about it because that was the thing that we did, right? And it wasn't in any kind of, racial undertone or whatnot. I had a lot of multicultural friends and so we always used where we were from as a uniting factor, whether it was through jokes or just understanding and appreciating our culture. So I had friends that were Egyptian, Palestinian, Lebanese, French Canadian, and American as well. So that I had that multicultural upbringing, but there were few within those circles that were Black.
No, I get it. Yeah, and I would say very similar. Like it sounds very similar to how I grew up.
Yeah.
So one of the things so when I first met you, and I'm sharing this for the first time, found you very impressive, and I didn't even know you, and it's awesome that we're actually here today on this podcast. This podcast is all about thriving. It's people that either I've seen and there's an energy that you just know they're in their thrive. But for the things that you do and the things that you're interested in, you are thriving. And I do believe as, thrivers, really, there's some things about their identity that they really know. And so my next question is really about your I am. Like if you really had to sort of give me your great I am, what would that be?
Right. That's a very good question. And it's taken me a while, to really, really hone what that is. And what I feel that I am at my core is a transformational individual. And I say that because I noticed throughout every aspect of my life where I was conscious about what I was doing, it's been focused on transforming something or someone. So I'll go back to undergrad, right? I got into the student council, the faculty student council, because I wanted to make some kind of change, right? I saw the direction in which, the school was going and in which the student body was moving, and I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to step in there and make some change. So when I became VP Finance, the first thing that I did was to implement a new accounting system that was driven by technology. Because before I was in there, everyone was doing the accounting by hand, on paper, in books. So I put in Simply Accounting at the time, which was, the best thing that we could get for a student body group. I implemented that, and then the following year, when I became president, again put in a lot of changes in terms of governance structure, in terms of the recognition that a lot of our student clubs got, and improved the relationship with our academic body with the administration. even defending some students that were accused of plagiarism, but actually weren't. They did not commit the act. So I sat on an academic appeals committee and spoke up on behalf of students that based on the evidence that was presented, weren't guilty of the crime that they were accused of. And then even stepping into the government, I tried to make some changes, but given the bureaucracy of an entity like that, you need like 50 levels of approvals just to do something different, And I remember one instance where I had spoken to one of our directors. I was at CRA. I was like, why don't we have some kind of a 360 feedback for our bosses, Mainly because I had worked with a particularly great boss, right? And I was like, I don't know why there isn't a way for us to express an evaluation for this guy that, would be recognized across the enterprise, And of course, they gave me the reasons like, oh, these are policies. And I was young, right? So when you're young like that, you feel that it's like anything is possible. And you're asking, why can't we do this? Why can't this happen? And then stepping into RBC, similar thing. In my first rotation, my first position at the bank, one of the first things I did was, and I'll tell you this story. This was quite funny. So I had left the government at the time. I think it was I had started January 2013, and when I left the government was running, I believe it was, they were running Windows 7 in 2013, and everyone had moved over to Windows 8, and and then I get to RBC and we're running Windows XP, right? So we're like 2 generations behind. And this shocked me because I was like, I thought the government was bad with technology. And I get into the biggest financial institution in the country, and we're using XP. So I found a way to connect with some of the IT folks, right? Because I was already used to operating with Excel 2010. And I was like, RBC was on a path towards upgrading. So I found a way to get myself early upgraded. So
there you go.
Actually function. And then I used the software access to develop new models, right? New reports, changed colors so that they were, I brought it all.
So you're ahead of the game.
Just pushing forward, And it got recognized in terms of some of the work that I was producing. Our SVP finance at the time loved the new reports that I had put together because they were less, childish, if you will, in terms of look and feel. So all of this to say, the core of who I am is someone that drives change, transformational in nature. I don't enjoy just accepting the status quo when there's possibility beyond that. And I've tried to do that in every space that I've been in every role that I'm in, whether it's paid employment or volunteering or mentoring or even chatting with young people, with kids. I try to make sure that at least that interaction, something different has happened by the time, they've left me or we've disbanded. And I hope to continue that into the future.
And so because you went on there, it's actually, this is a question that I typically ask really early in the interview, but this is great. I love it. So 18 minutes in, you're already demonstrating so much amazing value and inspiration. But I also want to know so that I can make sure that by the time we end this interview, that your legacy is a piece of it is left here. And so, because I truly believe we leave it in every experience that we have. What do you want to be known for at the end of this interview?
Oh, wow. I want to be known as a difference maker.
Okay.
A real difference maker. I wrote down, I went through this exercise personally to develop what I called my personal vision and mission statement. And looking at my purpose, right? And I have this even on my Instagram handle, right? Striving to impact people's lives one person at a time. And that's what I want to be known for, that I did that. Yeah. And I'll tell you where that comes from. I model a lot of my behavior and my philosophy around the way my dad lived his younger life. And he was a man of integrity, still is, even as he's old and retired now, but that's what he's known for, that he was a man of integrity and impact. We celebrated his 80th birthday back in 2018. And there was a group of people that were there. This was a massive party that we had for him back in Nigeria. And there was a group of people. One person that I met in particular was a person. He told me that he was my dad's first accountant. And my dad took a chance on him when he was 23. And my dad taking a chance on him was what allowed him to build his practice up until what he had at the time I met him. And, he told me, multiple stories of other people that my dad impacted in such a way, wherever there was an opportunity that he felt someone was good enough for, he'd make the connection, and fast forward to present day, it's kind of the same thing that I'm doing, making a difference and impacting someone's life. And I feel that, for me, the happiness is when I've done something that makes someone else either get ahead or it helps them change their situation into something more positive, or shift from a position that they are right now into something better or something different, however they choose to define that change. So that's what I feel my legacy should be, being that difference maker, and being the person who impacted people's lives.
Okay. So we are in a pandemic, and we're also in the midst of a movement. And so with the tragic death of George Floyd and all the events that have transpired since, and the eruption of the conversation around race and racism, there's also there's a significance and a symbolism that I know many Black people are carrying about the whole knee in the neck for that period of time, that 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Can you please share what that knee in the neck for 8:46 represents for you?
Yes. So like watching that was traumatic. It was heartbreaking. It was heart-wrenching. And I think this particular incident was different from everyone else or every incident before this because you had nowhere else to look at, right? There was no distraction. It wasn't like, people could get on a plane, go to a beach and just ignore this, right? We're in a pandemic, right? There's nothing else that has your attention except this. And to me, it was profound in the audacity, right? In terms of the act itself. But equally profound was what it catalyzed, right, in society. I feel that we've gotten a chance, and society has gotten a chance to look at the ills that we still have, with a significantly more critical lens than has been done before. Because people will parallel this to similar riots, similar protests from the past, it's like, oh, this is similar to the civil rights movement in the 1960s. But I think it's different. There's a whole different aura that this has triggered for people, for Black people in particular. There's outrage, or there was outrage, but there's also a sense that we're finally being heard we're finally being heard, not just by those that we want to hear us, but other people that are supporters, or people that have stood on the sidelines, not by choice really, but just because they had no clue what was going on. But again, that George Floyd incident, there was no distraction. Everyone saw that worldwide. And it's triggered something in everyone. And for me, so I look at this situation and I think, what are the positive things that can come out of this? Because it's not enough for us to just be outraged, as Black people, to say, hey, we've been telling you this for the longest time, let's just be negative about the whole thing. I believe that it is a catalyst for change. And like I said, my particular philosophy is around changing the status quo, right? and I focus on what can I do based on the atmosphere that this has created to move the needle forward when it comes to issues affecting Black people, issues affecting the Black community. And also particularly in Canada, recognizing that our own Black issues are distinct from the United States. Mm-hmm. And because they're different does not mean that they are less important, which I found that a lot of Canadians in general, we all feel that way. It's like, oh yeah, we pat ourselves on the back because we're not as bad as the United States. But this has allowed us to look at the glaring failures that we also have in our great multicultural Canadian society. But it has also brought to the forefront that genuine Canadianness, if you will, to actually have dialogue, have discourse in our polite Canadian way, but still be able to address some of these uncomfortable things. And so what I would say to those that are still thinking about, the George Floyd incident and what that means for either your individual life as a Black person or how you support as a non-Black person, I would say to just take the time to understand what the Black community in Canada specifically is facing, has been facing, and may continue to face for a while until we start to see a shift, right? And also to, if you're within companies, if you're within corporations, speak up, A lot of companies have touted the value that, they create spaces for you to speak up. But we know that, and from anecdotes, most people don't feel safe enough to raise their voice or to talk about how they feel about a specific issue. But I think that's something that a positive that's going to come out of this, or that has, is we now have the freedom or the room to say how we feel. And I always say to most Black folks, having a platform to say how you feel doesn't mean that you use it to tear down where you are, right? Because that also doesn't help. But be constructive, be focused on telling your story, and also offering some insights to how things can change. There's a lot that we can talk about on this, and I think we'll be doing this for the next few months.
For the next year, we need to. Just can't stop.
And the dialogue has to continue. Change of this magnitude is not an overnight thing. They always say an overnight success is 20 years long. So I think we're in that period where we're putting the foundation for that overnight success for changes with regards to Black, to anti-Black racism and systemic racism in our society.
And thank you for taking the space for that very insightful response. I appreciate that. Thank you. Husband's home. So through the course of this interview, one of the things I've caught from you, from the energy is you're and I don't even want to use the word confidence. You move with a real sense of purpose and intention. And so my next question is, I want to know, when in your life have you needed courage? And what did that look like?
Oh, all the time. Surprisingly, right? So, and I'll tell you, I'm an introvert, right? And most people will not believe that just based on how they see me on the outside. They see me on the stages, they see me in front of podiums, and, oozing that confidence that feels like, oh, this person is fully self-assured, right? But it wasn't always like that. I still need courage to step onto that stage, right? To step onto that podium. And I had to work on it, over a period of time. In high school, I was an extremely shy guy. Extremely shy. So like just working up the courage to just ask a question was difficult. But I threw myself into the deep end, particularly when I got into university, because I was in a business program, and I knew that for you to succeed in business, right, you can't just be the fly on the wall, right? And so that's why I threw myself into things that would get me out of that comfort zone. I did, student politics because I had to speak, right? I couldn't hide behind a shell when you're doing a campaign. And when you're addressing folks, you have to speak. But each time, I work up the courage to do that. Mm-hmm. And what I think has benefited me as well is something that I practiced even as a kid, is being able to communicate in a way that people want to listen to you. Ooh. Because it's not enough to just have something to say, right? But if you can say it in a way that captures people's attention, then the impact is more powerful. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people have, and I've had this friend when I was an undergrad. We were both on the student council together, and I think after we finished, he told me, he's like, Aziz, there was, working with you when you were president was, I fully believed everything you said, even if I knew you were 100% BSing, right? But it was like the way you said it just always convinced me that I was capable and, this was the right direction to go. And so I sort of carry that on, right? So it's that communication skill that I've used to overcome areas of nervousness, and it gives me that courage that I know that, okay, if I'm stepping into this place, I'm going to say the right things. I'm going to say it in the way that that people will listen, and hopefully, again, it'll have an impact beyond what I'm saying.
And I think there's such value in throwing yourself into these situations, just with that intention to just continue to build on your skill for one, but just get a little bit more courageous over time.
Yeah.
So is it getting easier?
It is.
Okay.
It's gotten a lot easier, and I've sometimes I put real purpose and practice in understanding. Like, it took me some time to understand that strength and how to
harness it.
I guess harness it, and also harness my own personality. So I read this book called Quiet, I believe by Susan Cain. It talks about the power of the introvert, right? And where that is useful in leadership, and how to make the most of your introverted personality in a world full of extroverts, or primarily extroverts. And that gave me a lot more confidence to just sort of own myself, own that capability and say, I don't have to be the one. I don't have to say things to be heard in a room all the time. I just have to say the right thing once. And that's all that matters,
And what is that book? Quiet by?
Yeah, it's called Quiet by Susan Cain.
So I'm going to read, because you wouldn't, is that Kane?
Cain.
Okay. Yeah. A lot of people don't know. There's an introvert side of me. I know it's loud. I know. But I feel like I need to understand how to harness my introvert.
Right.
Because I often silence the introvert and push through it.
Yeah.
So what's the most important thing that you've learned in your life? And if you can recall, what was life like before you learned it, and how's it transformed since learning it?
So the most important thing I've learned is really to speak up when something isn't right within you. You know that whole concept about the gut feeling. Mm-hmm. For me, again, being an introvert, you have the gut feeling, but sometimes not the strength or the courage to say something. And it's not always about, something is wrong, right? No, it's about, I have a point of view, and I feel that I need to express it, but sometimes I wasn't able to. And I've since been, worked on that, with actively put in efforts to work on that. And what it's done for me, it's freed my mind from a mental trap, if you will. Because for some of us, when you're at this level of introversion, you live in your head a lot of the times, And then when you finally say something, you wonder why other people don't get it. Well, no one was traveling through your mental wonderland with you. So I've worked actively on carrying people through my thought process, right? And speaking up about it. And life has been dramatically different, right? It's helped in relationships. It's helped in professional work environments. And before that, there were things that I would just bottle up. Even when I was upset at something, I wouldn't say it. So I'd carry a lot of moments of being upset and then would explode at a certain point and no one would understand why. But I've since been able to say, okay, I'm feeling upset now. Here's why. Can you not do this again? Type of situation.
more closer to the moment, to the moment that it happened. And to be quite honest, I think this interview is a true representation of you carrying us through your thought process of your life. I love how you've actually crafted this. This is why I was like, by 17 minutes, I hadn't even had those first 3 questions answered. I was like, wow, you covered a lot of ground for me. So I like that. I like that transcends just generally in how you conversate. That's awesome. So if in 150 years, science fails to save us all, and all that's left is a book, for all the thrivers coming up after you about your life, what would the title be and what would the blurb tell us?
Funny enough, I think it'll probably be the title of my podcast.
What? Okay.
Made to Lead. And I'll tell you why, because I think that was what I was designed to do, and it's not just leadership through having a title, right? But leading people to a destination, whether it's a vision, whether it is a state of mind. That's something that I think and I feel that I've been doing consistently for much of my life. And I believe that's where it's going to end. You'll read it and you'll understand, oh yes, I can see why Aziz was made to lead. It'll make a great book.
And I love, and by the way, for those that are listening, it's a great podcast.
Thank you.
And so I believe I could be wrong, but I'm thinking about mine. There was a need that you felt needed to be filled. And so can you talk, I wasn't planning to ask, but I want to. How did the podcast come about?
Right. So the idea started percolating in my mind about just over a year and a half ago. Almost 2 years ago. When we were starting to see a lot of the movement around being Black on Bay Street and all of that coming out. And I felt I wanted to start telling those stories of individuals on Bay Street. Initially, that was where I was only going to focus on. But I decided that, I think this story or the stories that need to be told are bigger and broader than that. And I wanted to contribute to shaping the narrative, not even just shaping, but telling the narrative of people of African descent from our voices. Because all too often, it's a lot of the negative stereotypes, the negative stories that fill the airways, and you can find the nuggets of good stuff, right? But I wanted to showcase the average Black person that's in society, that's doing interesting things and telling our own story our way. Because I feel that if we control that
narrative,
perception and the narrative, then we have nothing to worry about. When you think about the way American media influences global perception of everything, right? So let's take, for example, the coverage of this pandemic in the United States. If we look at the difference between the way this is covered in the US versus when the Ebola crisis in Africa occurred, right? Drastically different visuals, drastically different storytelling. And that's because from an African perspective, the CNNs, the Foxes, the MSNBCs all sent their foreign correspondents into Africa and they're capturing gruesomeness, right? But from the African side, we don't have CNN level foreign correspondents that say, hey, oh my goodness, I heard that the US is a hotspot. I'm going to send my team over there to really see what's going on. And, let's go take some pictures of, some of the 100,000 dead bodies that are probably being wheeled out and going to morgues with no family. Like, imagine some of those pictures, right? And what that translates into the perception of America in Africa. So I look at this as we're changing that narrative of what the average Black person looks like, is involved in, is capable of, so that other people can be inspired by that. And for other Africans or people of African descent, if you're in in an area where you're struggling and trying to figure out your identity or figure out your purpose, or feel that you're not capable because you're in an environment that makes you feel less than, you can hear some of these stories and connect with it in a way that probably relates to whatever situation that you're in, and be encouraged to just keep pushing on.
And we'll share later. I'll even have you also speak it into the podcast about where they can go and subscribe and find it. But they are aspirational stories. I have probably about 4 or 5 interviews. The last one was really interesting because he was in Ghana. He just, he went there back in December. I think it was supposed to be this month that he was supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so that was great. So I'm going into just rapid thrivers. I call them, I think you call them rapid fire. Yeah, so rapid thrivers. So you know the drill, okay? Yep. When you think about somebody who's thriving that inspires you, who comes to mind and why?
Oh man, it has to be Obama for sure. All right. So I have a thing for the guy.
That's okay.
Yeah. So he when he came on the scene back in 2007, like I followed his campaign to president all the way through, and he reminded me of my dad. He reminded me of, because he has that personality of service. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's what my dad was like during his time working in the government. Like, he was all about service. So it was great to see that, of course, being a Black man running for president of the United States and ultimately becoming president. He's, number one up there.
Awesome. I didn't even get to ask you about your daily habits, but if there's a daily habit that you have that helps you with your thrive, what is it?
So every day I try to read at least one scripture of the Bible, whether it's in the morning or in the evening before I go to bed. And I do that because it centers me.
Yeah.
Right. It keeps me focused on the greatness that exists outside of the trivial stuff that's going on in my life. And it just sets me on a better path.
And do you have a method for picking the scripture?
I just use YouVersion.
Okay.
Right? And I go with the verse of the day.
Yes. And then you read the whole
scripture. Yeah, I read that and I try to take it in for what it is. And a lot of the times, the way God works with some of these things, you get a verse that really just addresses what you're going through that very day or during that week. And it's like, okay, I'm set on, I know that I'm good.
That's why I get them on my phone, like the daily, and I never ignore them because
Yeah.
So what is a book outside of the Bible that helps you with your thrive?
So I recently read The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's a book by Ben Horowitz. So Ben Horowitz is the other half of Andreessen Horowitz, the venture capital firm. And it was really, really good. It was, he focused on, his story about, running his own company for a number of years before eventually selling to HP for about $1.6 billion. And it's not your typical, we were successful every single step of the way. No, he was fighting fires all the way through. And so he talks about that journey and also a lot of the leadership lessons that he learned. And when you read the book, it's not your typical, he tells a story and then, here's a lesson or something. No, it's like, it's almost very prescriptive. Like, if you're going to fire someone, this is how you should fire them.
Wow.
Right? And here's why.
And so you recommend it?
Yes, definitely recommend it. So funny thing is that it was written, I think it was published back in 2013 or 2014. And I just read it this year. And, its examples are very relevant today, especially as we're going through rapid change and, a pandemic. So all of the skills and things that come out of that book are so relevant and useful today. So
okay. The hard thing about hard things. Yeah. Okay. Got it. So what is an app or a productivity tool that helps you with your thrive?
So I've been using my Google Calendar a lot more. So I put everything in there from, date nights to work-related stuff to podcast bookings. Just it keeps me more significantly more organized.
Are you very organized and structured individual?
No. So So that is the most organized part of my life, right?
Okay.
And I'm one of those individuals that I thrive really in organized chaos, right? My fiance is super planner, super organized, so she's like the yin to my yang, and that's what makes us work, right? So I throw in a little bit of chaos in her life, and she puts a lot of structure, into
yours.
And that's why we work.
Yeah, sounds like my husband and I. And last but not least, as you're someone, like I said, you exude this sense of purpose and intention with a level of confidence that it's almost like there's a cloak of courage that you just, have. What is a misconception that people have of you when they see you in your Thrive?
That I have all the answers.
Mm.
Yeah. Because sometimes when you come off as you've described me, people believe that you have,
everything you say.
yeah, that you have every answer to everything, and that's not the case all the time, right? So what I've done to manage and mitigate that is just being very honest and declaring when I don't know things.
Mm-hmm.
Because I believe that, admitting that early on in any process makes it easier to, one, find the actual answer collaboratively, or figure out where to get it. But yeah, that's a thing. A lot of people think that, I can call Aziz for one thing and he somehow will know the answer. Most of the times that works, but I'm very self-aware enough to know when I don't know the answer, and I'm not ashamed to admit it.
I love that. And so where can we find more of you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on LinkedIn or add me on LinkedIn. You can check out my website, garuba.com, just to read up on my bio and my history. You can listen to my podcast, Made to Lead, which is available on all platforms, Apple, Google Podcasts, Spotify.
I highly recommend it.
Thank you. And follow me on Instagram at Garuba, on social media, really at Garuba. You can find all my handles, and on the podcast at Made to Lead Show as well.
And I will make sure that all of the links are in the show notes.
Awesome.
And so as a final question, finish this sentence. What the world needs now is?
Understanding. The world needs a lot of understanding. And, love is usually what the first thing most people might say, but I think when you have understanding, it's easier to get to that point of real, genuine love. Mm-hmm. If you don't understand my pain, right, it might be difficult for you to love me through my pain. Yeah. Right? If you don't understand my successes, it might be easier for you to hate me because of my success. Ooh, you know what I mean? Yeah. So I think right now, especially with what's going on around Black Lives Matter, I think the whole world needs a lot of understanding.
I heard the most profound thing. Understanding is the truth we stand under.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's deep.
Yeah. So Aziz, thank you so much. I knew I was going to enjoy sharing energy with you. I could have kept going. You are so insightful and very inspirational. And at the beginning, I asked you, what is something that you want to leave? And you want to be known as a difference maker. And you have demonstrated how you've done that in your life. I love the tangible tips that you've left on this podcast. My favorite story by far is the one that you shared about going to RBC and the story about the windows being so far dated and the work that you did there. So thank you so much for being, and thank you for Made to Lead. And thank you for wanting to amplify the African voice and the narrative in the story. You're an amazing human being.
Much appreciated, Nkechi. I was really happy to be on this.
Awesome. And to everyone that is tuning in, this is where I say, we're out. Yeah. So there you have it. I hope you're thriving and thoroughly enjoyed this episode. And remember, whatever platform you are listening to this on, please subscribe, like, review, and share this podcast with someone else you think can benefit from the tips that were delivered. As Tom Bilyeu says, when we help others think in a way that is empowering, that is the lead domino to create real change in this world. It's been awesome hanging with you. I'm your girl, and I'm